Vietnamese American Arizona Television.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to VAATV.com. And welcome back to the Real Estate VAA Real Estate Show. Knowledge is the power. So this talk show will cover a wide range of topics such as buying, selling, and investing in real estate, and provide the latest news and information about the real estate market from the expert, Mr. Scott BARLOW from SF Fuller Real Estate Investment, who opened doors to the American dreams of home ownership. He will also provide the latest information on how to earn some profits by having real estate investment. Hi, Scott.
Hi, how are you this evening?
Very good. How about you?
Good.
So the weather getting a lot cooler. I loved it.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right? Yeah.
It was way too warm for too long this year.
Exactly. Yeah, I keep waiting and waiting. So
it's
really
cooled down nicely. And you know, when we start getting the cooler weather, that's where we start getting the influx of winter time visitors. And they bring a big increase in the amount of activity in the real estate market. So between now and probably April, things pick up.
Yeah.
And that's the way it works in our market.
Wow. So meaning like selling, buying? I mean like buying.
Buying and selling.
And selling. Yeah.
There's a surprising number of folks here from out of state who own homes and own property. And this is the time of the year that they come back and they buy and sell. They sell an existing home. In fact, I have a client from South Dakota right now. We put one of their homes on the market, and then they turned around and we've made an offer on another home. So that's kind of typical of winter visitors.
Yeah, so you talk about that. Now, I think we have a question from the audience who was asking about the capital gain, the selling.
Capital gains is a great question. Let me start with capital gains on primary homes first.
Yes.
Because that's where most folks are most acquainted. On capital gains, if you purchase your own home, you live in it for 2 years, and when you get ready to sell it, if there is a profit, you may be subject to capital gains. But if it is your personal home, you have an allowance where the federal government will, the first $250,000 of profit is waived.
Okay.
So that's for an individual. For a couple, it's $500,000. So suppose you bought a house for $100,000 20 years ago. And here in our market, it's risen and risen and risen, and now it's worth $600,000.
Right.
So you subtract the $100,000 that you purchased it for,
first,
and there's $500,000 left. That because it's a personal home and it's owned by the couple, that is tax-free. There is no capital gains on it.
So they'd be able to get all that money back without paying the tax.
Exactly.
And they can use it to buy anything else they want.
Now, if it goes over $500,000 in profit, then they would pay capital gains on that. And the typical rate of capital gains here in the state of Arizona, for most people where they qualify with their income category, it's 15% for the federal government and 20% for the state of Arizona, or 5% for the state of Arizona, a total of 20%.
20%. So that you said because of state of Arizona, but different state will have different
states have different rates.
Oh, I see.
And so let's suppose that it wasn't your primary home.
Right.
Just like my clients, who I'm talking, they're looking at a house, and when they purchased that home, I sold it to them 10 years ago. It was a HUD home. It was a foreclosure. So they paid $92,000 for it. They're going to sell that house for $400,000.
Ooh. Wow.
So they realized a profit on that, and they will pay that capital gains on that home. There is no way that they can avoid not paying the capital gains unless they do what we call a 1031 exchange.
Yeah, so about that too. Do you have information about that?
Oh, absolutely. Question from the audience.
Question.
Yeah, how about if you buy a house and let's say you bought it for $100,000.
Yes.
And you put $50,000 in for home improvement, for remodeling or whatever. Can you deduct that before you do a capital gain?
Absolutely. I was going to circle back to that, but that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Because during the foreclosure era, people were buying homes extremely cheaply.
Ah.
And then, of course, they get into the home, they put a new roof on it, they put a swimming pool in it, they put tile in it. So all of those things, you keep records of what your investment into that home were. And then when you get ready to sell it, you can deduct that as well as the basis that you purchased the home for.
Okay.
So that becomes the amount of the difference. So let's suppose that we've got some folks and they bought that house for $100,000.
Yeah.
And they put a new roof on it.
Okay.
$25,000. They put a swimming pool on it.
Right.
Another $25,000. They put in carpeting. They put in new cabinets. So they've got an investment of they put in $175,000 of improvements on that home. Added to what they purchased it for, that home is $275,000 that they would subtract, and then that amount would not be subject to any of the capital gains. And that would apply both to their primary home as well as to any of the investments.
Oh, okay.
So if you're an investor and you're looking at whether it be a commercial property, whether it be a piece of land, if you're putting investments into it, track what you've invested into it, because when you get ready to sell, that becomes part of the amount that you can reduce what your capital gains are.
Oh, wow. So how to prove it? Like by receipt or something?
Receipts are usually the handiest, easiest way. And if you've got an accounting software, just log it into your accounting software.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. And the tax, now we're going to go back to the 1031.
1031 exchange. You know, one of the things that the federal government did, and this was to encourage investment, is to allow you to keep your nest egg intact. The idea being, let's suppose that you buy a investment property. Say you buy it for $100,000, and you keep that property, and over the years, the value of it goes up to $250,000. Now, you want to go buy something else with that $250,000. Normally, if you just sold it outright, you would have to subtract the $100,000, and then you'd have to pay capital gains on the balance, the $150,000.
Yeah.
So that, and with a 20% tax rate, that would reduce it significantly. So what the federal government has said is that it's IRS code 1031, and what it does is it allows you to take that full $250,000 from the proceeds of that property and go buy another property. You can apply that full amount.
Okay.
Now there's some various rules to it, of course.
Okay. Yeah.
They call it a like-kind exchange because there's a list of different types of investments that will be allowed under the IRS tax code. You can invest in real estate. There are certain things you cannot invest in. Generally speaking, most of them are more along the lines of personal property, such as artwork. You know, if you wanted to invest in that, that's not allowable. But generally speaking, and I think some people get caught up in the idea of like-kind exchange.
Yeah, because I don't know, like-kind meaning like house and house, or business, building, things like that.
No,
yeah.
What it really applies to is if you're exchanging real estate for another piece of real estate, it doesn't matter whether it's bare land or whether it's an apartment building or a factory.
Oh, okay.
But it's real estate.
It's real estate. So it's not like buy a house to live, but like invest. Exactly. So invest. Yeah.
Yep. It can't be your primary home. You can't live there.
Right.
But it has to be something that is an investment.
That making money, or like buy to have some profit.
Exactly.
Like that.
So in this scenario, we've sold one property.
Yeah.
We took the $250,000 from that property. We go buy a second property, and now a number of years later, this property is, because of appreciation and improvements we've made, the property's worth $1 million.
Ah. Okay.
Now, once again, need to keep track of what improvements you've made. If you put a parking lot in, if you put new lights in, those types of things. But your accountant can help you with that.
Yes.
For the 1031 exchange, there's a timing that will allow you to buy another house, right? What is the timing? I forgot. I remember there's
the exchange code requires, number one, when you sell that first property, you cannot touch that money.
Okay.
It has to go to what they call a qualified intermediary. Typically, it's a company that's well versed in handling the 1031 exchange, and they serve as a fiduciary.
Right.
So when you sell that first property, they get the the
Holding
funds
the
and
money.
they hold it. Exactly. So when you buy the second one, then it goes directly to the title company who disperses it normally. But the general rules are this. You must identify the new property you are going to buy within 45 days.
Wow. Okay.
So you have
45
to,
days.
you have to be out there looking and you have to hustle. And you have to close within 180 days. So those two requirements can get you hung up. Oftentimes, and I do this with my clients,
Yes.
we identify several properties that they're very interested in.
Okay.
That's with the idea being that if, let's say they make an offer on one and it fails, or they make an offer on one and during an
not
inspection
done.
period, they decide they don't want to do it.
Oh.
But you've got that 45 days, so it's good to have a backup plan in those instances.
So let's say if you didn't meet the requirement, what happened to the money?
Well, then you pay capital gain.
You have to pay for
Yep, you pay the capital gain. So that's
pay right away or wait until tax time.
Well, it's up to you work with your accountant on that one. I won't. I don't have the answers on that. But the key thing there is when you know you're going to do a 1031 exchange,
Yes.
plan
ahead.
so that you know what you're going to do quickly if you have a hiccup in the process.
So I know, like on the contract, I sometimes see like a contingent upon selling of other property.
Yes.
Is that something like that? Like when you decide to sell your property, then you say like that, so that until you find something else, then you allow that to close.
Well, what you're referring to, and what I see most commonly is where you have a private party who is wanting to buy another property.
Okay.
They have no intention of doing a 1031 exchange. Typically, it's on their primary residence. So they're selling one resident, and that maybe they know they're going to just in the example like I was just explaining about.
Like if we didn't know which property yet to buy, so we have a piece of property, we want to sell it, but we're afraid of paying capital gain, or we're afraid if we enter the 1031 exchange, then the time limit, right? So
Well, you're kind of mixing two different scenarios together.
okay.
The 1031 exchange is more along the lines of investment properties only. But you do have buyer contingencies, especially on single family homes, primary homes. And in those instances, it's where you have a buyer who wants to purchase another property, but he needs the proceeds from selling his home so that he can pay for the second one. So what he does is he negotiates with the seller of the second home to allow him time to get his house on the market and get it sold so that those proceeds can flow to that sale.
Okay. So how about the seller side? What to do to before selling that piece of property, because we don't want to pay for capital gain and we don't know which property to buy yet.
Well, once again, that's where we go back over to the rules under the 1031 exchange.
Yeah.
So that early on, even while you're in escrow on the sale of that property, you should be working with your realtor, your agent,
to look for
to find the properties that would fit that category in an exchange, and not just have one, but have a couple that you can use as backups.
I see. So then because if you decided to sell, because sometimes I see people send letter and say, I'm ready to pay you cash for this property, or I'm ready. I mean, like I have people interested on buying this property of yours, but you have no intention. You know that you make profit,
yes,
but you have no intention yet because you don't know what you're gonna invest on what, and if we have enough money to do the next step or whatever. So then you want to sell because it's good price.
Right.
So that's why, so you think best if when we want to do that, then just go ahead and go and look anything because you have to close it. If you don't want to pay for capital gain, then that's the way to go.
That's one way to do it. But engage and look for properties and identify properties as early in the process as you can.
Like when started thinking of selling it, right?
When you get that letter from and typically, I might add, in our market, there's a lot of people out there who
is that the way they solicit? I mean, is that real? when they say something like that.
There are some folks out there, and they're very good buyers. I've sold homes through that same thing. But oftentimes with some of these folks, what they're doing is they're sending out multiple letters.
Yeah.
And they do have a certain amount of cash. Typically, it comes from what we call hard money or private lenders.
Right.
And they're soliciting for someone who wants to sell a home. And when they do get someone who's willing to sell them a home, and generally, I'd say in 99% of the instances, they're looking for single-family homes. They're not really looking for apartments. They're not looking for commercial properties. They're looking for single-family homes that they can turn around, flip. When I say flip, they own it for a short period of time. They do some modest improvements to its appearance, and then they sell it for a profit.
A profit.
Yep.
Oh. So they flip, because people say something like flip and sale. Is that meaning of that, right? They hold for a short time.
Yep, exactly right. And generally, it's they want to hold for about 90 days, just so that there's no confusion with some of the loans out there.
Oh. So they typically need to hold it for 90 days. They need to.
And oftentimes 90 days is about perfect with some of the improvements that some of them are making.
Okay.
But then they turn around and they get it back out on the market. But let's suppose that you receive one of those letters and you talk to the individuals and they offered you what you, in your opinion, was a very fair price on a home that maybe you had as a rental or an investment. When you're considering selling that, and I would say just as soon as you sign a contract with it for the sale of that property, you need to get into the process of getting a property identified so that you can roll that money over into it through a 1031 exchange and avoid those capital gains.
So, some people, they also mention that capital gain, you have to pay it no matter what, like sooner or later, right? So somebody said like you either, like if you enter the 1031 exchange, or if you don't enter the 1031 exchange, you pay now, and then later on you can use the money to do anything. But I didn't know what's
and that's absolutely true. Once you've paid the capital gains tax on it, that money is free. So you can invest it in anything you want. You can spend it. You can buy the artwork with it.
Buy an painting.
But if you use a 1031 exchange, you must always consider that at some point when that cash is out, you're going to have to pay capital gains on it. The advantage in the 1031 exchange is it allows you to keep your capital funds intact for longer periods of time. Because, once again, let's go back to the one where we were talking about $250,000.
Right.
If we paid capital gains on that, you'd only have $200,000.
True. Yes.
So how much more property can you buy with $250,000 as opposed to $200,000?
So meaning like use that money to produce more money.
Exactly. And so, like we were saying, you use that one for $250,000, you purchase another property, and over time the value of that becomes $1 million.
Yeah.
So you've got that full $1 million now to go after another property, as opposed to only having $800,000.
Yeah. So like this is a long term thinking, like getting using the existing money. Everybody know like they have to pay sooner or later. But then now they have opportunity to hold back so that they can use that money to buy something better.
So when you're in that investment property mode, you need to think of it as a long term business.
I see. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, because like confused, like you doesn't matter, you're gonna pay capital gain. So the more value of the property, then the more capital gain you're gonna have to pay back. Either way.
Either way. But like I said, the big advantage of it is it allows you to keep your investment intact, and you can buy more
and bigger and bigger. Yeah. I see. Oh yeah, because like is have to pay. There's no way that you can, like, because of age or because of, there's no way, you gotta pay, right?
Well,
when they get older, they say, they don't have to pay tax. I don't know.
The only exception is if you're in certain income brackets, but then you only get a certain amount of leeway on that. So, the one thing that's that everybody says is for sure: death and taxes. So
Ah.
the federal government's always going to get to you.
Yes.
So let's say if you, the one who owns the property, and you're gonna pay the capital gain on it, but let's say you drop that, let's say you die, who's gonna take over that capital gain tax?
Oh.
That's a good question. A lot of it depends on how your title or how the ownership is structured. A lot of folks on investment properties, they'll use LLCs. LLCs are just like corporations.
right.
They're entities.
Limited.
They don't have a lifespan like you and I would have. So those LLCs, if they carry on, nothing changes as far as the tax requirements. They go on forever. However, let's suppose that I bought something in my name.
Yes.
And I had it for a number of years and I passed away.
Yes.
And my children got it as part of my estate. They have what's called a step up in basis.
Oh.
So if I bought the property, say for $100,000, and I did the $250,000, and I bought another property, and now the value is $1 million.
Right.
When that property passes to my children, they have a step up in basis, and their step up in basis is to the $1 million.
Oh, wow.
So let's say if the property in trust, who have to pay it? People on the trust gonna pay the tax?
I think trustee, you mean like successor trustee?
Like a revocable trust.
It's a revocable trust?
Yes.
Well, that would be to the beneficiaries.
Yeah,
and then,
whoever.
and then you may get into a situation where you may have probate coming up and those types of things.
Probate. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So maybe.
So that, and once you get into probate, probate is basically it's a court or a legal function where it allows for disposition of the deceased person's belongings, the real estate, all those types of things. And a lot of that's out of the scope of me as a realtor.
Yes.
Typically, if I'm representing an estate, what I'm looking for is a court order that affords a living person to make the decisions. In some states, they call it the RP, or responsible party. There's a couple of different definitions. Some states call it the executor.
Executor, yeah.
But they all kind of have the same legal function where they've been given the authority by the court, signed by a judge, to go ahead and represent that property and be able to sell that property. It gives them the authority to handle that.
So, and then after they sell it, they have to fulfill all the owning taxes and all that kind of things, right? Before the money distribute.
Exactly right.
Distribute equally, to everyone.
And and that goes back to probate because the court will specify who gets what in what amounts.
So this is, because raise a question like things happen, nobody know, unpredictable, things like that. So if the person have created trust already, then easier, right? Like everything's there, they know where, who contact and all that. But if person didn't have a trust at all and it's happened like that.
Or they didn't have a will.
Oh, then what happened?
Then what they do is it's called they die intestate, where they don't have a document. Then the whole thing goes to the court, and the judge will make his ruling.
Make a decision, for that, and will assign who's going to be responsible for that particular case and get the money.
I mean, and that brings up an excellent subject.
Yes,
you should always have a line of succession on paper,
Yeah.
so that your heirs, if you want specific things to go to a son, a daughter, a cousin, you want to make sure that those things are addressed on paper, so that if indeed it does go to probate,
right,
that judge can look at it and go, well, this is the will of the person that passed away, because they're more than likely going to grant those wishes.
Yeah, easier than, and then the processing time takes shorter, right? Than
Usually.
Then don't have anything.
Exactly right.
Wow.
And the more value that deceased person has in their accumulation of overall, especially if they die intestate, it takes longer.
And then maybe at the end, I didn't know the value and how much money gonna be back to their here. I mean, maybe it's no more. I mean, like with all the taxes, with all the costs, all the expenses.
Well, and remember one thing: if you're in probate, You've got the court. Who else are you going to have?
Oh God,
Attorneys.
Attorney fee.
And
Yeah, that's something.
and attorneys, not to knock attorneys, they provide a valuable service. But if you can avoid having to pay excessive attorney fees by structuring how you want your estate handled, do it now while you're able to. Make those decisions now so that your heirs are not having to fight in court or something
because
later on.
I also heard the scenario that lady, the husband passed away, but they don't have a chance to make anything yet. So, the wife, they're asking for the attorney, attorney asking if they can representing the case and take the money back for them, for sale for the property and all that. But at the end, she only get like a few $1,000s.
Yeah.
After everything. Yeah.
And that's
all.
Because of court costs, attorneys' fees, and everything adding up.
Right.
But remember, here in the state of Arizona, we're a community property state.
Yes.
So if you have it properly titled, so that you have the title listed as community property with right of survivorship, what happens? If one spouse dies, the full value goes to the other spouse.
Yeah.
And there's no need to even have it go before.
Not sure about California law is that West State Arizona is like automatically when the spouse, even though when they register or not register, even they buy the property, a married person that's sold and separate. But if something happens, it's automatically go to the spouse, doesn't have to take the title. So not sure about California. California is not that way. Yeah, because they always have to do a granting rental.
And you need to pay attention because the state, each state has different rules.
Yeah. So those important, and then so we already so you say about the 1031 exchange, the benefit of having it. And to hold the money so you can get the more investment in something else. You still have to responsible to pay for capital gain sooner or later. And then the probate, that we cover that, right? For some of the advantage of not delaying the process and maybe lose more money for attorney than get the trust prepared.
Get your trust prepared, and at a minimum, do a will.
Will.
At a minimum, do a will.
Is a will that sometimes I see people do the fingerprints on the will. Is that legit, or they have to have notary public?
I'm going out on a limb here, but I think you got in the state of Arizona, it's got to be notarized.
Got to be notarized. Oh, okay. Yeah.
It can be. You can handwrite it. It doesn't have to be typed. You can handwrite it, but you still need to have it notarized. And
if something happened to me, then all my property, checking, saving account going to go to this person, that person, things like that, right? As a
and when it comes to individual accounts, you can already go ahead and. My mother's 92 years old.
Yes.
And I have a brother who lives right there with her.
Yeah.
So she has added him as a co-signer on her checking accounts, savings accounts.
Okay.
She has stock accounts, and she set me up to handle her stock accounts.
Yeah, okay.
So that's in the event that something happens to her. There's already
then all
family
automatically member already inside it. Yeah, so that's another way to do it. Yeah,
that's another.
So
way
always put in one or more family member.
Exactly right.
What's the difference, beneficiary or in the together with the account?
Well, a beneficiary is the person who is going to receive the funds. Even though I've got authority to sell stock in her behalf, I may not be the beneficiary. Another one of my brothers and sisters may be the beneficiary.
Oh, okay.
So the beneficiary is strictly the person who receives
the money.
The money.
For that. I see. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, I have
You got a good question.
Yes.
I want to change the subject a little bit.
Okay.
So let's say I want to buy a house, and you're a realtor. You take me to see the house, and I like that house, so we're going to make an offer. You fail to disclose there's a deceased person in the property, and I found out later. What happened then?
Well, in the state of Arizona, and that's because that's an interesting question. We've had several court cases here. So let me read this to you.
Okay.
In the state of Arizona, that falls under what we call stigmatized properties. Arizona Revised Statute 322156, real estate sales and leases disclosure. No criminal, civil, or administrative action may be brought against a transferor, a lessor, of a real property, or a licensee for failing to disclose the property being transferred or leased has been 1, the site of a natural death, suicide, or homicide, or any other crime considered a felony. 2, owned or occupied by a person exposed to the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, or having acquired immune deficiency syndrome or any other disease that is not known to be transmitted through common occupancy of real estate. 3, located in the vicinity of a sex offender. And so by failing to disclose any of those facts, those are no longer grounds for termination or cancellation. Now, I know that there are some states that it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
I've even heard that there's some of the East Coast states that if a home is quote unquote haunted, that has to be disclosed. But here in the state of Arizona, we do not disclose that. We're not required to disclose that. Now, if you're my client and I'm representing you and you're curious and that's something that you know could be a real concern for you, how do you find out what happened there? Well, there's a couple of different ways. Number one, if you're worried about a death there, public records are going to indicate that. So you can always go through your local law enforcement and ask for a public information request on that property so you can see what the history on that property has been. And you may find out that, yeah, there was a natural death there. Somebody passed away and they died on the property. Or you may find out that there were illegal activities on the property. So you may want to
carry AIDS or disease or something.
You're not likely to find out about somebody with AIDS. Because that would not be something that would be in public records.
Yeah, that's right. You can't. Yeah.
Lastly, the big one that I think is probably the one that probably gets most people's emotions going are sex offenders. So when it comes to sex offenders, you can go to the Arizona Department of Public Safety. And on their website, they have a sex offender database, and you can search it by neighborhoods to see if there's sex offenders living in your neighborhood. And frankly, I think most people would be slightly shocked at the number that are spread out throughout our communities.
So let's say if I want to have those information.
Yes.
And you have represented me as the
realtor.
Would you do those service and searching and provide it to the buyer, or the buyer have to go and get those
buyer request? You mean? Yeah.
That's a great question. And our real estate commissioner has addressed that with one phrase. We cannot be the source of the information, but we can be the source of the source. In other words, what I can do is I can tell you where you can go to find that information. One of the things that we have is the Arizona Buyers Advisory. And we've shown this before in the past, but once again, this hits on all of those different issues. And it actually, in the Buyer's Advisory, and you can get an electronic version of this, it has the website links so that you can immediately link up and look up that information. But, you know, it's one of those things that if I'm representing someone and, you know, this is just kind of an anecdote, but probably about 10 years ago, I was helping a client from California. He was looking to buy a property because his daughter was going to go to ASU. And we found a property. It had formerly been a frat house. It was about a block off campus. And they had turned it into condos. And we had the right price, everything. And we started to do our due diligence period. And I suggested to him to go ahead and pull the Tempe Police Department's records, because you can look at a lot of stuff online. One of the things that we found is in the square mile area where this condo was that he was looking to buy. In 1 year's time, there were over 900 burglary from vehicle incidents.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, I pointed out to him because he was going to have her drive a luxury SUV.
Oh boy, yeah.
And I said,
Tesla,
that's going to be a prime for somebody to break in.
Yeah.
And so that prompted him to cancel his contract. And we we found them a house in a gated subdivision.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
So-
that's a very good point, because if nobody know, I mean, look at it, so close to the school and didn't know.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
extremely
Yeah.
convenient.
Yeah, so
But-
walking, yeah, but
that
neighborhood
same-
still.
Yeah, the neighborhood was just terrible when it came to vehicles.
Wow. Yeah. So like basically you said if you check with the city or a state, there's certain things that you can find, but not everything. Not like about that.
HIV is probably a little bit more difficult because of HIPAA and medical disclosure rules. That's probably a little bit more difficult.
But I think like people more kind of worry if they buy a house that is haunted at night, so they also worry. And then like usually I see people when they buy the home, they always like pray or you know, like do some
Blessing.
the blessing, you know, thing like that before they move in. So then that is like a tradition. It's not a religious or anything, or not like a superstitious or anything like that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and state law doesn't recognize haunting at this point. But like I said, I do know that some of the states on the East Coast, they do. You know, I think of Salem, Massachusetts, or some of those types of places. One interesting thing that I would tell you, and this is just from my experience.
Yes.
A number of years ago, I had a seller who was selling the property, and we were in escrow and getting very close to closing. Now, the wife was not on the title. And she came up with an objection and said that my baby died
Oh.
in that house.
Oh.
So that came up entirely different. And that was a disclosure we had to make to our clients. We did some research on it, and we found out that what had happened was the baby had been put in a bathtub and left unobserved for a few minutes.
Oh.
And ingested water. Paramedics were called. The child was transported to the hospital and died a few days later.
But then died in the hospital. Then.
Died in the hospital.
Yeah.
So we got the full
But
story.
accident. There's an accident in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in that case, the folks that purchased the house or were purchasing the house, they went ahead with the sale and they bought the house. After they moved in, they did have somebody come in and do a blessing.
No blessing. Yeah.
And you know, and that's one of those things where you do it based off your own beliefs.
But yeah, because that's like a spirit. Because I heard like, I think like majority people that stay in California, but nearby Rio Saigon, like nearby in the Orange County area, like there's a piece of land. I mean, talking about like houses, it's been haunted and nobody buy it for many years. They bought it and they couldn't stay, and then they just and ended up like that house is just like kind of nobody occupied, and they sell very cheap and all that. So just leave it for a long time. But now when I come back, I see that they built something all new, and that piece of land cost so much now versus before.
Sure.
Like talking about that 10 years ago. Oh my God, nobody want to buy that because it's keep like saying haunted. Yeah. Like
The house's reputation,
yeah, it's
it
come down
became a
because of that.
stigmatized property is what it became.
Yeah.
And so that, going back to the Arizona law about not disclosing things like that,
Yeah.
that's one of those things that the state here has decided to do just to keep that from occurring on properties.
But like, I think that's part of the understanding of the buyer's point of view. If they worry or if they are looking into those, then they can kind of research, right?
Yes,
Find out, yeah.
And-
but it's not like required, like you have to like bring it out, right? Not required
That's
for
correct.
that.
You're not required to disclose it. Now,
Yeah.
one thing I might add though,
Yes.
about this, because there was a court case
Yes.
where somebody was selling a home and they knew that there was a sex offender that lived a door or two down. And the buyers asked, "Why are you selling?" Well, they were selling because they had children and they didn't want to be close to a sex offender.
Oh.
But they didn't disclose that. They made up a different reason for why they were selling. So you can't lie.
No.
If somebody asks you a direct question, you don't have to disclose. You just, the court came out and basically said, had the sellers just not answered the question, they wouldn't have been in the wrong. But if you start making things up, that's where you create problems. for
Meaning
yourself.
like if you know, you have to say. right? Yeah, I mean,
Well, in that case,
they know.
It becomes far more
Yeah.
difficult if somebody asks you point blank, is there a
Yeah.
sex offender living next door?
Oh, but like
you
they
gotta
all know.
answer that.
They all know. I mean,
Yeah, but
It-
if it's common knowledge, in
but
the
like for me,
neighborhood-
like let's say who live next door, I don't even know.
sure,
It's just like, yeah,
you don't have an obligation to get to know your neighbors, but once you know, and you're asked that question point blank, you have an obligation to be truthful. Don't be deceptive.
I see. Yeah.
So you
that's
kind of
important.
walk a fine line there.
That's very important. Yeah, because if people ask you that straightforward question, yeah, is that, then, but like, let's say if the person, so you say like, okay, in this case, like the seller no, okay? Let's say if the situation where seller didn't know, when they ask about that, what's the right answer to answer? Like, I don't know. Maybe you find out or something.
If you don't know, you're under no obligation. If you don't know something, you're under no obligation to go out and find out about it. All you can do is honestly answer.
It cannot be blamed. That's what I'm trying to say.
Exactly
Like,
right.
later on.
Exactly right. You can say I don't know, but the obligation of doing the due diligence is on the part of the buyer, and the buyer, while the realtor is supposed to be the source of the source. In other words, where I'm supposed to be able to tell you to go to the Department of Public Safety's sex offender website. Here's the website. You look it up. You determine whether or not a sex offender lives too close to the home you're buying. Not me. That's the obligation that's on the buyer.
Oh, I never thought of it though. I never thought about like find out about sex offender or like come into. Sometimes the buyer didn't know what to ask. Sometimes.
Well, and then once again, that's why I say, this particular document. Any buyers I have, I always send them this document along with the purchase contract and everything, and they have to sign this, acknowledging that they've received
that they receive and read and understand.
Exactly. But I mean, the subject.
Too much to read.
But it hits a lot of different subject matters.
Yeah, it just bring up a lot of questions. Yeah. Because like sometimes you don't know what to ask. When I buy a house, when you want to buy a house, what are you looking for? Because people buy a house to stay, to settle, to have a family, to have kids, or move forward. And of course, they have to worry what to worry. Like if this is safe, if this gonna bring any trouble, any bad spirits or whatsoever, right there, right? Yeah.
Most in our contract we have a due diligence period / inspection period, and it gives you a long list of different types of things that you can research.
I see.
The most common things that people do, of course, is they hire a home inspector to come out and they do the termite inspections as well. Those are the most common things, but you are not limited just to doing those two things. You can do just about anything that you want to do. For example, let's suppose that you're living in a subdivision.
Yes.
And you like horses. So before you even buy that house, don't you want to know if the subdivision allows horses?
Horses or not? Yeah, because you want to bring them. Yeah.
So you're gonna get to the CCNRs from the subdivision. You're going to look through those, and you're going to do enough research to be able to know that.
Right. That's depend on the situation or what is it that you want to do with the place you stay.
Exactly right.
With your hobby, is that allowable?
A more common thing would be that since COVID, we've got a lot of people that are working from home.
Yes.
Are home-based businesses allowed? Yes.
So let's say if talk about inspection.
Yes.
So let's say you take the people to this house, and this house have unpermitted unit in the back, or they converted the garage into another room with the kitchen with the. So let's say usually I know when they financing, the lender will certain requirement to make sure it's safe for hazard and health hazardous. Let's say if they pay cash and there's no lender, so are you gonna disclose to them like, okay, if you buy this, if the city gonna know it exists with no permit, and they have a plumbing and have a gas, are they gonna be required to knock it down or things like that?
Those are all great questions because certainly here in Arizona, there's a lot of properties like that where you may have a little secondary building, and somebody's living in that. And we have one thing that we have that's very common here is a lot of homes when they were initially constructed, they had carports instead of garages. Or they had a covered covered enclosed patio.
Yeah.
And later it gets converted to an Arizona room. Arizona room, you got air conditioning and those types of things in it. In the garage, where they've converted it from a carport into a garage, now you've got walls, now you've got enclosures. Many of the cities already have rules in place because those are pretty common changes, whether they're permitted or non-permitted. Most of the cities will have some type of allowance and a procedure that you go through. So if you've got those unpermitted improvements, you still want to be able to get credit for them. You still want the home to be safe. You still want to have, if you're selling it, you want to get full value for the home. So there are methods to go through, but like anything else, it's better to be upfront and honest. Go to the city, talk to them, find out what the procedures are. In many cases, they'll send an inspector out. There may be a small additional fine. You may have to pay for building permits. You may even have to tweak the building itself to bring it up to standards. But it's better to do it on the front end than not do it at all. And one of the places where you really catch it is when you've got the tax records and you get the title commitment, you start paying attention to what are you looking at over here? And and if it says that you've got a single family home, and you look over here and you're actually looking at another building on the property, that should tell you that something's askew. So you need to, that's where you need to do your due diligence. And you can ask, there's nothing that prevents you from going back to the owner and asking them questions. Do you have the permits on this? Do you have the plans on this? Who did the work? Was it a licensed contractor? So all of those types of things are important, and you have that opportunity to discover those things during the due diligence.
Because I was thinking sometime when the seller tried to sell the property and it's some add-on like that, they cannot consider the value of it. And then the buyer, when they think, oh, it's really a good deal for me, I get that extra. And if they explore and do further more, then the city might ask them to knock down everything or whatever.
They very well
lost
could.
That. Yeah.
They very well could.
So that's a chance. I mean, if they report or if they come up and ask and all that, then the chance the value will come up. But
exactly.
If not, then can be a problem.
If they go out, even after the fact on an unpermitted, if they go back to the city, they get the city to evaluate it. The city issues an inspection. And they approve it. That information will also go to the assessor. And so, let's say that we had an Arizona room. And we converted that to living space. Now it's got air conditioning. It's got the proper number of outlets. It's got the proper number of windows. Everything's safe on it. The county will come back and they will reassess that property, add that additional square footage on there. It'll raise the tax rate slightly because it's a bigger building. But now
it's more
you don't have to,
square footage.
You don't have to look over your shoulder worried about that you didn't do things proper.
But they never ask you to knock down everything, right? I mean, the inspector will come in and say, okay, you need to improve this, you need to improve that, and because when they build, they didn't ask first.
Generally speaking, and I mean, you kind of have to approach it with a common sense idea on it. But if it's constructed with modern techniques, generally the inspectors can make some type of allowance and do an inspection. They may ask you to redo a few things. But if they get out there and they see that there were no construction
not the
techniques
right
used,
way,
and that the place is
safe,
just
unsafe or something.
There's no way to, with the current method that they constructed it with and the way it's sitting there, if they look at it and they go, the safest thing to do is knock it down and start over. That you may very well have to do that.
Oh my God, because like I heard the story from one of the loan people that they didn't know. I mean, the owner didn't know when they refinanced the house. Okay, and they built a unit. They thought like when they refinance it, the appraiser come over and do the appraiser, you know, and then the owner say, okay, come here. I just built this one. Maybe you add in and then get more value, more money. But I ended up come back to the lender reject totally because like they say it's risk. They say, oh, I thought like the value like this with no permit on the property, they're not going to take it.
That's right.
I mean, instead of getting more, like they thought like they get more value.
Yep.
Yeah. So the permit is very important. If they want to disclose to get more money, then that piece of new disclosure gotta be had permit.
You know,
right?
when you take shortcuts, very seldom do they work out.
Yeah.
You need to
So
follow
that's
the
really
proper
hilarious,
procedure.
yeah.
So you do need to go back to the city or the county, whatever jurisdiction has the building safety on that.
Yes.
Have them inspect it, make sure.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, and I've dealt with inspectors on properties for a number of years.
Yes.
Most of the time, they're not out there looking to try to make you tear things down. They're trying
Try
to help you
improve
along.
or make it safer. Right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Because like they don't think. I mean, if the person think it closely, like if the city already say that unsafe, if people live there, it's life and death, right?
Oh, yeah,
if something
absolutely.
happens, so at that time it will be worse, even worse. Insurance not cover,
Correct.
and you know everything down the line is going to be a lot of liability, responsibility, all that in there in the shoulder of the owner. So,
You know, once something is wrong,
yes,
you can't build anything right on it.
yeah,
You got to go back and fix what's wrong.
yes,
I have another question. Let's say you represent me
Yes.
to buy a house. I'm short of closing costs. Okay, are you allowed to give me a credit for my closing costs?
allow. You mean allow?
Allow, you know,
Uh-huh.
like you cut your commission to pay for my closing costs? Because you know, in the Asian community, they have a habit of expecting that the realtor do a little kickback. But I know it's illegal, but I did loan before, so I know that some agent they allow to credit back to the buyer some of the closing costs, not for the sale price, but the closing costs. So I want to know if that
Here.
allowed here in Arizona.
Oh,
What I would say is this.
yeah.
Anything that you do needs to be on the final settlement statement. The final settlement statement is what the federal government is actually going to look at. And that is the legal document as far as how that transaction went. And any credits, any arrangements have to be on there. There can't be a side deal over here or anything going on.
Disclosed, everything disclosed.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, disclose, yeah. Because like, let's say if you want this credit, then the agent agree or seller agree, whatever, right? So it's an escrow have to disclose.
And
Yeah.
the lender and everybody else that's involved in the transaction, the lender, the buyer, the seller, everybody has to have that same information. There can't be a little side deal over here where just one or two parties know. And I got another little story for you on
Okay,
that one.
yes.
This goes back to 2008, 2009 when we had foreclosures and short sales. And I was representing a client and they were buying a home and there were two loans on it. Two of the big banks. I'm not going to say who the banks were, but it was two of the big banks. And they were buying it for $315,000. One bank was getting $300,000. The other bank was getting $15,000. So the bank that was in first place was getting the bulk of it. And then the second place bank, I don't know whether it was a HELOC or just a second, but they were going to get the $15,000. So we get to closing a day or two before closing, and I get the estimated settlement sheet.
Yes.
And I'm looking at it, and it only says $300,000.
Ah.
So I call the title company.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say which title company because they're
Right.
still in business.
Yes.
But I called the title company. I talked to the escrow officer, and she goes, I asked her, I said, well, where's the other 15,000?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's 315.
Right.
She goes, I can't talk about that.
Huh?
That's what I said.
Oh, really?
She said, I can't talk about that. You need to talk to the other broker.
Mm.
So I called the other broker, and she goes, oh, no, you guys just pay the 300 and then write a check to the other bank, personal check to the other bank. And I said, no, that's fraud.
No. Because the value and the whatever, the closing at the end.
That was fraudulent.
Yeah.
Because the bank that was in first place, if they had known that there was that additional funds being in, they had a claim on that additional funds.
Yeah.
So as it ended up, I called my clients and I advised them of what was going on with that.
Yes.
Well, they had a family friend that was an attorney, and they said, would you mind talking to him? I said, of course, not a problem. So I give them everything. The following day, we closed for $300,000, and there was no second bank.
Oh my God!
Once that attorney got hold of them,
which means that they have to pay outside first before they enter the contract. Right?
Oh yeah, it was.
I mean, like
that,
it got to be like clear out.
Like I said,
you cannot like do during the transaction.
You cannot do. You cannot do anything on a transaction if it isn't on that sheet.
Oh yeah, like not under the table, not.
No.
Somebody they do that. They didn't know. I mean, that's fraudulent. Yeah, like they always do for tax purposes, for everything. Yeah.
I want to bring it up because in Asian community they think differently. So I want to make sure they understand today. They understand the procedure, the legally way.
Absolutely, that document is it is sacrosanct. You do not violate that document. People, there are realtors, there are brokers, and there are lenders in this state that went to jail over some of that.
Yeah, because like that's undisclosed money.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like before, nobody thought about that so much, and I thought like, oh, okay, maybe we got a great deal. I mean, there's say like I pay you if you have lower the sell price, then you pay less tax and everything else, and then that's just do that on the side. It's just like oh, I didn't realize that. Nobody, if we don't know, like the buyer as a first buyer, they don't know. They say, okay, they've been like asking to do as told, and then okay, then they do it, but didn't realize it.
Exactly
so,
right.
You bring a point, like very good, like everything on the paper, black and white. Yes, like we gotta show money go to where, money from
down
where,
to the penny.
Yeah. To even penny.
Down to the penny. Everything has to balance out. Yes. And when I get typically a day before the day or two before closing, the escrow officer will send out estimated settlement statements to the two brokers on either side. When I get my statement, the first thing I do is I pull out a calculator.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And I go through it and I start looking at things. And if I have a question, I'll go back to the contract and I refer to it.
Yes. That's true. Yeah. Because like if you don't know, sometimes like I know like maybe an error with the calculation, we don't know, so I just do hand calculation.
Exactly right. I've seen errors in calculations, but I've also seen where additional things popped up that were not part of the contract. And I've seen things where, hey, this needed to be added in here.
Yeah.
One of the most common.
But the escrow company, will they be liable if they do that way? I mean,
part of the reason
I see people do that, like they took the money out first, and then they lower the price so that the portion out, and then
they
know on the contract that's the price, but they do that way.
Yeah, they should not be doing that because the purchase contract is actually the escrow instructions.
Yeah,
that contract tells that escrow company how they're supposed to handle that transaction. And so you've always got a piece of paper where you can look at and go, okay, this wasn't followed. We need to do it this way.
Right. Yeah. So I see like only a little bit of carefully, like when we do things, if we don't do the right way, down the line there will be an issue. There
There will
will
be
be a big
repercussions.
issue, like nobody know. Maybe you lose your license. Maybe you even like pay the fine or even go to jail. There's a lot of things for that. So gotta know that your position. You know.
Well,
like
and
everything else,
that
but-
it falls
yeah.
into different areas. And
Yes.
I can give you one last
One last.
example. I recently sold a property
Yeah.
for nearly $2 million.
Yes.
And that property had a home on it that was over 5,000 square feet.
Yes.
But then it had another building behind it that was almost 8,000 square feet. And they had used it as a wedding venue.
Ah.
It wasn't zoned for a wedding venue.
Oh, really? Wow.
So that building could not be used for the purpose that it was. We eventually did sell it, and we marketed it as a commercial property.
Yes.
But you have to go and look at what the zoning ordinances say and make sure that you're marketing the property for use in an approved manner. And I knew that the wedding venue was not going to work because when I met with the county code compliance people,
Yes.
they had the records. They showed them to me, and the individual who had owned it previously and built it
Yes.
had a complaint for
Yes.
the wedding venue. He went back and he had applied for a special use permit.
Ah.
It was turned down by the staff, and it even went to the board of supervisors, and the board of supervisors
Yeah.
said no.
Because they buy like somebody I know, they buy like a small store, let's say in a piece of property, and about zoning, you say it's business, but then they don't know about zoning, and then later on they build another like a stage or something. They build like a singing contest or whatever that thing. So if that thing is allowable with the zoning or not, right? That's
right. And
Or
it's
they
easy to find out whether or not it's approved, because if you go to the zoning,
Yes.
and that's it, that's in a lot of our records, our tax records and everything, it tells specifically what
What
the
the meaning of the zoning, right?
Right.
Like all one or two
So
or
you
three.
go back into, say it's Maricopa County, you go
Yes.
into Maricopa County and you
Yes.
see what, say the zoning was listed as C2.
C2.
So you pull up C2 and you look at the approved
What's
types
all
of
that?
businesses that can
Approved
go
type
in
of
there.
business. Wow, that's really yep. Very great point that we all know. So today we have a lot more questions. You know, thanks to our guests to the studio.
Those are excellent questions. I appreciate it.
The question and it's bring more fun to the show. So now our time is up. You have anything to share before we can see you, our audience next time?
No, that's about it for this
That's
week.
it. Yeah.
All I can say is one last good thing. The Federal Reserve Bank did not raise interest rates this week, so they're holding steady.
Yeah.
And
Great.
hopefully inflation comes down another few ticks. Maybe going into 2024, we might see the end of some of this in a little lowering of interest rates, because I know there's a lot of folks out there that would like to buy homes.
Yes.
But at nearly 8%, it's got them out of the
much,
market.
yeah.
But we'll keep our fingers crossed for 2024.
Right. Okay. Well, let's hope. And thank you for watching VATV. Scott, BARLOW, and LINH. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.
LINH xin cảm ơn sự theo dõi của tất cả quý vị trong những giây phút vừa qua. Chương trình VATV xin kính chào, tạm biệt và xin hẹn gặp lại quý vị vào lần phát hình kỳ tới. Mọi chi tiết về thông tin thương mại và bảo trợ, xin mời quý vị hãy liên lạc về địa chỉ email vaatelevision@gmail.com và số điện thoại là 480 289 9816 480 289 9816, website vaatv.com và vaaznews.com. Xin kính chào, tạm biệt.